Okay. Well, you ready to get started here?
Damn.
Everybody's got your food ready? Yeah, go ahead and get it open so we don't hear the crackling of the, okay. All right, well, I will call the work session for May to order. Mr. Francis could not be here. Chairman Francis had a prior engagement. He called me and asked me if I would fill in for him tonight, so I said I would. And Mr. Patrick's also had other engagements that he could be here tonight, so we'll excuse both of them, and we'll start off by turning it over to Dr. Nolte for welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Just a couple announcements. A reminder that it'll help us if we activate our mics and talk close to those when we're speaking, and then certainly we can deactivate them when we're not speaking. We do have a closed session potential on here that will let Mr. Smathers determine whether or not with you all if you go into closed session. If that occurs, we will need to stay in this room and we'll ask any guests to leave. We have a school food service function in another room so that we can't normally go in the room that we normally do. And then with the consent of the board, I'd like to talk to you all about summer board meeting schedule that I discussed with Mr. Francis, if you would allow me to do that at the end.
Be glad to. All right. Does anybody on the board have anything they want to bring to before us before we get started?
It's Teacher Appreciation Week, so maybe say something.
Yes. If you can go by and visit schools, I've gotten several emails from different schools about the giving teachers duty-free lunch this week if we can, and helping them out, and going by and saying how much we appreciate our teachers. So if you're in the area of one of our schools and you've got a few minutes, please stop by and just let them know how much they mean to us, and how much they've done for the kids this year, and give them a pat on the back if you can.
Mr. Francis, on behalf of the board and central office, we'll have a little something for each school on Thursday.
Okay.
We met and talked about that earlier.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is Mr. Smathers. Okay. At Mr. Smathers' request, do I hear a motion to go into closed session?
I'll move.
Mr. Rogers made a motion. Do I hear a second? Second by Ms. Barrett. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are now going to go into closed session. Okay, we're now back into open session, and next on the agenda is Ms. Barker and Mr. Hines.
All right, change subjects. Just want to talk to the board and get your, run something by you regarding hard to fill high school positions. Being at a high school last year, there are certain positions in the high school that are hard to fill at this point. Several interviews. Mr. Hines is here to just talk to you about Tuscola this year. So in certain areas, it's gotten really, really tough to fill those positions, to get somebody in the room for our students. So in talking to principals, they were like, we have offered incentives in past for hard to fill positions, and they felt like, and I agreed with them, that would be a good thing to be able to do that, to try to attract some people, retain some teachers to teach some hard to staff positions even within a department. So I think Mr. Hines wants to talk to you just about that and the past history of hard to staff, or
I'll be happy to.
Yeah.
Yes. Excuse me. If you remember in the past, some of the newer board members weren't there, but we first brought to you a plan to do hard to staff, retention, recruit, that type of thing for math, science, and EC. And we first said that we would pay a incentive bonus to sign on, a signing bonus, if you will, of $1,000 to teachers who would sign up for those particular subject areas. And then we put in place a retention for EC areas like the Intensive Intervention Wing at Clyde, the Middle Academy at Waynesville Middle. There are some other II programs at the high schools, for example. These were bridges at North Canton. At the time it was at Central Elementary, and then it's gone to North Canton now. Those were very hard to staff, very hard to keep people in those positions, very difficult positions. A lot of turnover, a lot of turmoil created as a result. And so we put in place a retention bonus at the end of the year, paid in May, to those folks in those positions who stayed in those positions for a full year. The signing bonus was, for lack of a better term, useless. Okay, the $1,000 simply wasn't enough. And we couldn't afford enough out of the Title II fund. When you compared the one-time payment of $1,000 to the difference in the supplements in Henderson, Nashville City, Buncombe, over a 30-year career, it was just no comparison. That did no good whatsoever, so we stopped that after 1 year. We did have some people come to work for us, but we didn't think it was because of that signing bonus. Okay, they wanted to work here, they were from here, there were other reasons. The retention, we think, has worked very well. Since we instituted the retention, we have not had any turnover in the Bridges program, the Middle Academy at Waynesville Middle. That's been going on 4 years now, and we haven't had a single teacher turn. No one moved, no one leaves. So that's working very well. Now, those two schools, those two programs, it's a little higher retention because those teachers are, as far as the amount paid to them, is higher because of the work they're doing. They're actually managing a program. In the II situation at Clyde and at the high schools, it's a lower amount. It's $1,000 a year, and we've also done it with Central Haywood. And up until last year, it worked very well there. Now, last year there was a large turnover with that particular school. So it has worked well in some situations. In the EC situations, it's worked very well. And we think that it could work well at the high school level to incentivize, not necessarily to hire teachers into a math or science position, but to take existing teachers and put them into more difficult teaching subjects within their department. So if you have your much more experienced teachers who could handle or maybe possibly improve performance in the more difficult to teach subjects in their department, even though, you know, y'all probably understand how this works in a high school or a middle school. The newest teacher gets the most difficult subject, and after 10, 12 years, they work their way into teaching honors or whatever, AP. You know, you've arrived when you can teach honors and AP. And I think part of the idea behind this is to entice some of those teachers to go back to the more difficult subjects again with their experience that they've gained over 10, 12, 15 years. And so Ms. Barker can talk to you about what that incentive actually is, but it has a good chance of working, I think, as a retention type deal, to keep those teachers teaching those subjects that are more difficult to teach.
And I'll give you a couple examples. Last year, when Knox Harden and I were interviewing, she was helping me interview math for math teachers, Math 1 specifically. So, you know, with it at Pisgah High School, there are a lot of experienced math teachers, and as Jason says, a lot of times they are teaching the AP and the honors, and they've been there. And so I think the principals and I, when we got together and we talked to Jason about this, is if we could, you know, maybe just for 1 year, if they would teach one section of that Math 1, if they would, you know, for a couple of years, you get someone else in there, you've coached them, they've sometimes it will be your inexperienced, not always, but it'll be your inexperienced teachers teaching those harder to staff areas. Does that make sense? And then your teachers that have been there for a while that are more experienced, they're teaching the honors in the upper level. You don't see that in elementary because they're cross certified and different things, but you do see it in high school. And so it's tough. And it's tough, you know, I'm sure you're sitting there thinking, well, you could go in and make them do that, and you can do that, but you've got a teacher that has been there for 25 years that's taught. You know, you also don't want them walking out the door and going and teaching across the county because they're going to let them teach AP. So it's a coaching model. The principals want to use it. They want to. They feel like this is money that could be provided maybe through Title II with recruiting and retaining teachers, or with money they already get locally. It would not be any additional money, but it is something they would like to try. And we're seeing some really innovative pieces out there. I know at Pisgah this year, you know, they had a coaching model where they had a couple of teachers really working together. And I think that's something that could really benefit our kids, to have some experienced people in these harder to staff positions. I know this year, Mr. Trantham and Mr. Hines, you can tell them how long to find a biology teacher. Was it math?
There was one biology teacher that went into October to get, and we have one math teacher that we went into January to get. Again, would this particular program entice a brand new teacher off the street? Probably not. It's just not enough money. But, you know, compared to other districts, just plain pay. So would it help to entice very experienced teachers who already work for us to take the more difficult subjects? Yes, I think that would work.
Kind of, what are we talking about per, I guess it'd be per semester then?
Like per class, like $500.
So $500 per class?
That's what we were thinking.
Per semester, and so that's, you know, at most they would take on 2 of these. So you could do $1,000 a semester if you did 2. Now, it would be up to the principal who they put in these positions and who they talk to about offering it to. And of course, we would bring that to y'all, of course, for approval in the end. But most, you know, these teachers are teaching 3 subjects, 3 classes a semester. So at most they would probably have 2, but sometimes the principal may want to spread it around and see who does better with that more difficult subject, you know, to get them to try it again. So they may just have 1, depending on how many sections that school has in a given semester.
I think what they want to do is, you know, with these hard to staff positions, is to take your veteran teachers, try to give them an incentive to maybe teach 1 class, and then they're building the coaching, and, you know, you get people in there and you can hire them and coach them, and, you know, it's just a very hierarchical teaching at high school. And so
it's a cultural change in the high school. It's always been, and I was one of them, you know, it's always been, you start out with the most difficult classes and work your way to the honors. And that doesn't mean honors is a piece of cake to teach, don't get me wrong. Those kids put you on your toes every day. But the strategies that you use with them is a little easier to deal with than the more difficult classes. And we just want to see what that experience that these teachers have over time will do with those classes.
Have you surveyed those teachers?
the principals, and help me out, Jason, they, I don't think so, because I think we wanted to talk to you first. We did talk to the principals, though. We were very hesitant to let them, mention that to see. And, it wouldn't be something you would want to make someone do. Absolutely not. It would just be hopefully a selling point to say to Jason, who taught AP U.S. history, which is what you taught forever, hey, could you come down? Would you teach one class of, freshmen?
Well, I taught freshmen too.
Would you teach that one class this year? We're trying to hire somebody new, let them teach, and just try to. And I think that would be good for our kids to have some experienced teachers.
Dr. Rogers, one of the things we have talked about, a couple things actually with the principals. One is that in terms of their history of being able to grow students in a year, we have that EVOS data, that those teachers be sort of dark green or blue.
Yeah.
And that would be one of the criteria. We don't want to, use, even though it's a small amount of money, we don't want to use it on someone who has not been proven to grow students. The other thing we've talked about initially is those funds coming from PRC 804, which is their local remediation funds. Certainly, if we had other funds made available, we wouldn't use those. But at this point, we identified the funds, and we talked about looking at the teacher's history in academic success.
I was just curious if we'd went so far as to ask some of these teachers that are highly experienced and highly qualified if they would do that for $500.
Well, we want to get your sort of blessing. We want to talk to you about it first, and then maybe bring it to you Monday or at a very near board meeting, and get you all to say we could do it before we ask them if they would do it, and then not get your blessing.
I think another selling point, one selling point on it too is that I think that's gonna help get these kids on up on the faster level, help them grow faster. That's what we're trying to do, have the highest academics in the state. And that's another way I think we can obtain that, by having those experienced teachers, get those kids, pick them up on the right path, and,
Because a lot of times your most experienced teachers often in a high school are with your juniors and seniors. And, so I think it's real important to be able to sit down to that teacher and say, I could offer you this, will you do this for me, just one class? Will you do it for 1 year? And I think, we have great teachers in our schools, y'all know that. The majority of them will say, I'll do it for you. A lot of them will do it anyway, Dr. Rogers, without having to ask them. But, it is different when you got Bunkum knocking on their door and saying, well, come over here, we'll let you teach all AP, which is exactly what would happen. And so you have to be very careful, because we don't want to lose all of our great people that we have either.
My question was, will $500 move the needle?
I don't know, you've got some more money to give?
Larry, give me your check. Larry's got.
Larry, who's got that $100 bill over there?
Checks for everything.
And I don't know, and they were real adamant, the principals too, we could try it for a year and see. But I felt like these people that they're going to be talking to are experienced, proficient teachers who you want to be able to, in the elementary and the middle, there are performance bonuses given for growth. There are no performance bonuses given for high school teachers. There are for AP, for pass rates in AP, but your teachers that teach EOGs in high school don't get that money for, like third grade reading bonuses in fourth grade. If you teach math 1 or biology or English 2 in the high school, you could recruit them, with that. If you could say you're eligible for that state bonus, that's $3,500, but we don't have that.
And we could also look at it as a way of saying thank you
Yes.
for what they've done for our kids over the years as well. Yes, like you just said, some of these teachers would do it anyway because that's just who they are. But it's also a way of saying, hey, thank you for doing it, and here's a little bit of consideration.
Yeah. And nothing long term, and nothing.
As long as it moves the needle.
It is a switch, like we said in the culture. Like she was saying in elementary, you take your most experienced people and put them in Title I, doing your pullouts with reading. And that's kind of the idea here, is take our most experienced people and put them in the most difficult area. And Dr. Rogers, to answer your question about the $500, I think the 500 was arrived at more as what these principals thought they could afford out of their remediation money. If other funds were brought into play, we might could offer more if y'all were willing. But
is there a way you can look and see sort of a ballpark of what kind of fund or how much this might cost, and maybe bring it to the finance committee Monday night and let us?
They, at $500 with the given sections the principals have, they were saying it was going to be about $12,000 to $13,000 per school.
It's just our 2 high schools
It's
too.
the two high, Tusco and Pisgah.
Just Tusco and Pitt.
And we think they have that in their 804 remediation funds. And I don't want to turn into Scrooge, having asked you all to spend a lot of money in the last year, primarily on our people. But if it's okay, I'd like to, with your approval at a regular board meeting, to try this out. And then if it works and we can come up with more money, maybe do that. But I think if we could just come back to you during a regular meeting and get your approval to try it.
If 500 wouldn't do it, we could always revisit it again later. But if you multiply that by the sections they could possibly teach, it could be more than, it could be 1,000 to 1,500, depending on how many they pick up.
I would like to think that, I applaud y'all for doing your homework first, number one. Number one, I'd like to applaud y'all for doing your homework first and not speaking with the teachers, but speaking with the principals in the background just for the area that it could possibly get turned down. But
Absolutely.
then, obviously, I think you're on to something if you try it for 1 year and the 500 don't move the needle, then you decide, is it more or is it less or is it none? But I think it's a good starting spot.
Thank you.
I think the best statement that I heard was it's gonna be better for the kids.
It will be.
That's what we're here for. And I think that's the most important thing.
Anybody have anything else they want to say?
I agree.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Thank you,
Oh.
Ms. Hines.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll expect to see something Monday night on that probably.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Next on the agenda is Dr. Putnam on support service updates and the board-owned vehicles.
Almost forgot to turn my mic on. I've shared with you, these are really just informational type things. First in your pack is summer projects. You can see a list of what each of our crews will be working on. Many of those were a part of our proposed capital budget for the coming year. And I can go through those, but I think,
I think everybody can look at them.
right, you can look at that. That's good bedtime reading if you so choose.
All right, everybody has the proposed projects for the summer. If you have any questions on any of those, you can contact Mr. Putnam and he can address them. All right.
And so the next thing that I would bring to your attention is the use of Bourdon Vehicles. If you'd like to read through that, this has been discussed both in building and grounds a couple of times. And I just wanted everyone to have a look at it again. It's been revised. We received guidance from our insurance company that this MOU would reflect, which is if an employee so chooses to use a board-issued or board-owned vehicle to transport a student that is not their own student, their own child, they would not be covered in the event of an accident. This MOU would allow our employees to transport their own child to and from school on their way to work or on their way home from work. So it provides that allowance. The unique situation we faced was employees who, that's what they do now. They are the transportation provider for their student. And the board-owned vehicle, which we intended to be a service to our employees, became a disservice because they would have to drive all the way home, get in their personal vehicle, drive back to their child's school, pick them up, and take them back home. And that, I knew that was not the intent of this board. So any questions about that?
Didn't hear, did we check on the insurance, or is the pupil covered and everything? Okay.
Yes, did check on it, and, you know, this MOU explicitly states no one other than the employee and their children are to ride in the vehicle. And that ride should be to and from work. And it specifies that is to and from a Haywood County school.
What if they're dropping their spouse off at work? Was that ever addressed? Because it does say child in here and it doesn't really
Right.
address their spouse.
As long as they're familial, they'll be covered because the driver,
Yeah.
it's part of their family. We can add that in there if you'd like.
Can we change child to family? You know, if they're, you know, dropping them off.
Immediate family.
Immediate family, we can do that.
Okay.
I think that'd be better.
Okay.
That covers our concerns in building and grounds with transporting other children or friends.
Okay.
The one thing I do just want to ask a question, I'm not saying one way or the other, but it says that, please be aware that if any personal use of the vehicle, regardless of whether it follows the directive, may result in criticism. I mean, what does that entail? Do you need to does that mean they're going to get a letter in their file? They're just going to get scolded? I mean, that's.
That is speaking to any misuse. We're trying to guide or steer employees to thinking responsibly and acting responsibly with this vehicle. Extended stops at which may be valid stops. For example, they need to grab a gallon of milk at Ingles. Grab a gallon of milk. To go in, grab a shopping cart and fill it full, that's not a good idea. So we're really just trying to encourage them, you know, you need to be mindful. Anytime you use this vehicle, it is short, immediate stops to and from your path that you would normally travel to work.
Also, under extenuating circumstances, they are supposed to talk to the supervisor first.
It is correct.
And they know that if, you know, multiple misuses could result in them losing the ability of driving a vehicle.
That's correct.
Just again, you know, I call you from time to time and talk about staff discipline. Those are personnel matters, but you know that our approach is really individual. I think if we had a problem with one employee, we would measure that based upon what the employee did and start with, you know, minimal corrective action and then move up. We would not want to get into a situation where we put this good agreement in place and then remove the ability to use it for all of them. So we would address it on a case-by-case basis. And, you know, we're just trying to have a practice of we do what we need to do to correct the behavior, no more, no less.
Sounds good. Anybody else have any more comments? Thank you, Dr. Pope.
Under contract to work on some of the jobs,
Yes.
access road, is that Clyde?
Yes, that's the, for the II wing at Clyde Elementary. We discussed, well, I think it's been discussed ad nauseum at, trying to get that road, underway so that we've got good access for emergency vehicles in the event we need them.
The rest of the time in the summer, they're gonna be working on getting work orders.
I would expect that. Mr. Buchanan, he's been, as he should with his son, the last 2 days. So I'm going to hope that the rest of our time is spent catching up on work orders.
Dr. Putnam. All right, next on the agenda is Dr. Nolte with some updates for us. And
I'm going to scoot over to the other computer, just mainly for Shelby, so she can see. Just a couple policy updates, regulation updates. Just to bring you up to speed on a couple things that we've been transitioning through this year. The first one, around Christmas, a little after, we had several discussions about the cut of athletic uniforms. I met with our athletic directors. We have an annual meeting for those folks. I think you also have a copy in your packet. But I met with the athletic directors at their regular meeting, gave them this regulation, administrative regulation, which we will attach to an appropriate policy, and asked them for feedback, and told them that, for lack of a better term, we wanted our student athletes to have competitive uniforms, but we also wanted them individually or even collectively to be afforded some modesty and to make some modifications, legal modifications to their uniforms. I did get some feedback. None of it was substantive. None of it really had to do with the content. It was some of the language and punctuation and things that I had. I got that kind of feedback. So basically, what we have done is Dr. Putnam is in the process. I think he's already called every athletic director, sent them an edited version of this regulation, and reminded them that in the fall, they're to inform their student athletes about this policy, and student athletes may use the regulatory part of this policy if they would like to have a little more modest coverage if they can. So I won't read all of that to you. I think the highlights are that I did take some time to extensively look at the National Federation of High School Regulations about uniforms, as well as the North Carolina High School Athletic Association regulations and requirements, and use that language to say that student athletes, for their tops, they could use colored t-shirts or undergarments as long as they matched the uniform and were legal and would not result in qualification. Also described all the details in the federal regulations around that. And then for uniform bottoms, that they could apply shorts over or pressure compression garments under shorts if they so choose to do so, so that they would be more comfortable participating in sports. And so just want you to know we've reminded them about that. We will actually now attach this to the policy so everyone can see it. We'll ask them to remind or inform their students about it as we move into putting our fall teams together. Most of the uniforms that have caused problems in the past were volleyball, cheerleading, wrestling, track, cross country, tennis, and swimming. It's just the cut of those, mainly singlets or very tight-fitting garments. So just you may have additional questions or comments, but this is something that we took you very seriously when you brought this to our attention, and we wanted to let you know we were going to put it in place in the fall. So any questions about that one?
And just for the board, this is something that you have, as superintendent, the authority to draft and go ahead and implement without it coming before the board tonight, correct?
That's right. Just on a side note, and I know we've been here quite some time, I don't want to take too much time, but when we shifted to the new board format from the North Carolina School Boards Association, and those are good policies. They're very good policies. We have discovered that many of those policies say the superintendent shall create regulations. Okay, and so we, as an administrative staff, Trevor, who manages the policy committee, as well as myself and other people like Jason and Jill, and we have been in the process of creating those regulations that provide guidance. We hope this fall to actually bring you a list of all the policies that have that in it, so you can just see and get those in place. There's another set of language in the policies that we're working very hard to compile a list to share with you that says there shall be a report to the board. And I suspect that is just dozens of policies. And so when we get that list compiled, we will bring that to you either in a work session or a regular session and say, which reports do you really want? So, you know, as a side note, those things are going on. They're good policies from the State School Boards Association, but they do have those two phrases in it that we want to really work to make sure that we're addressing.
One question. Go ahead.
May want to make one little change. I'm afraid some people are going to get ruffled here. If you don't look at the second to last sentence in the first paragraph, with design feathers.
Yeah, that should probably be featured. Thank you.
I think we're going to get some ruffled people in.
All right.
I was wondering what that meant too. That's kind of what I was asking. Also at the very bottom, the bottom bullet, the last bullet, on the top it says uniform NFA's top regulations, and the second one it says uniform bottoms. It says top regulations again. So that, or is that just?
What line is that, Mr.
Very
Roy?
last bullet.
Says all other
Yes,
Carolina High School Association and
thank you.
should be bottom regulation shall apply.
Yeah.
Very good. Keen eye by the school board and the attorney.
Now, will each student get a copy of this as in file, or this the athletic director or coaches are gonna?
I think it'd be very fair to ask them to distribute these when they have their team meetings.
Because you get
There's their regulations in their team. Yeah,
You get-
it should be part of their handout.
concussion forms and all that other stuff. I mean, you get a pack of forms when you're playing sports that thick, so this could be just one of the many pages in there.
I want to applaud y'all for, this was brought up back in volleyball, to be honest with you, and y'all didn't forget about it, and you started working on it, so I appreciate that. I think it's a step in the right direction.
And thank you very much. Slow and steady wins the race. We'll just keep working on things until we get them the way we want them. The other regulation is we had a recent discussion, as you all know, you had a work session about distribution of non-school materials. That was mainly around Bibles, but if you think about it, we have a lot of student interest clubs that have the potential to distribute materials that aren't ours. And so another set of policies that we've written the regulation to go with, one is the distribution of materials policy, one is an advertising policy. Those go hand in hand because when you distribute information on something, you're really advertising for it, whether it's sold or not. And so we spent some time just trying to provide additional clarification. This certainly is a draft. It still has draft on the top of it. I sent it to Pat and have not had a chance to get his feedback, but we wanted to let you all know that we're still working on this. And basically the general statement just acknowledges that from time to time student interest clubs would want to share non-school materials and they also might want to do some advertising for things that they believe in. The regulations are really designed for these clubs. They're very different than organizations that are tied to the curriculum. Organizations, Future Farmers of America, Future Business Leaders of America, curricular organizations usually have state organizations and constitutions and bylaws. They're pretty heavily regulated. Student interest clubs form when there's a critical mass of students at a school who are interested in something, and it can be a religious topic, it can be chess, it can be gardening, sportsman's club, and they form, and they are a little different. They only exist as long as there are enough students at the school who have that interest, and sometimes they don't exist for a few years and then they exist again. So what we tried to do was to categorize times in which these clubs could distribute some non-school materials or even advertise a little bit, and the rest of the time they would certainly need to follow our policies for not distributing information outside the school and not advertising. Our overall goal here is to maintain our our limited forum and not to create an open forum where anyone can do anything. So I talked about a lot of people with this. Trevor was the person who helped me come up with the word proprietary. That's part of his business background. And what we did was break the club's activities down into two groups. Proprietary activities, just looking at the root word there, it's an activity that they own, either literally or figuratively. So if a club, rents the football stadium and invites people to come, and only those people are coming, or if they go to an event in Asheville or someone else and only other clubs are going, or they're in a regular meeting and club meetings are there and potential members are there, or it's some kind of sanctioned event that it's only for them, or the people that want to go on their own, then under these regulations, they would be able to distribute information to people at the event that are members or want to be potential members or are like them. Certainly, if you look at Fellowship of Christian Athletes, Youth for Christ, Bible clubs, when they're having their own little meeting, if they want to distribute Bibles, they can certainly do that. If they all go to a rally together at a church, or they have rented or leased our facilities or someone else's facilities, they could certainly distribute materials within the context of their proprietary event. And we don't think that's a change, but it's certainly delineated better, and I think would make them more comfortable. Non-proprietary events are really events that are just not really exclusive to them. It's an event tied to things going on at school or at a school event, and they're not the only group there. It's not exclusively theirs. And so it's just the opposite of proprietary. And in those events, they can still do a lot of things. One of the examples I talked to Trevor about, let's talk about Sportsman's Club for just a minute, as opposed to other clubs. If they're at the regional Sportsman's Club competition and they wanted to pass out to their members, or even clubs in other areas, we think these are the best 3 bows for shooting in competitions, and these companies sell them. Here, take this or don't take it, but we can give that to you. They're only talking to people like themselves, and the only people at that event are really other Sportsman's Club people who would not be offended by that information. However, if it's not proprietary, then they can do a lot of things, but not distribute non-school materials and not advertise. If it's not proprietary, they could certainly share information about the club. We're FCA, we're the Sportsman's Club, we're the Garden Club, we're the Drama Club. Here's how you become a member. Here's a schedule of our next meeting. Here are things that we do. These are humanitarian or civic activities that we participate in. This is a fundraising event that we're having to support our club activities. These are our club activities. We're anything that they're doing, as long as they're not distributing non-school materials or advertising, is still open for them to do. And then the next little section, ways that we would try to support all clubs, all student interest clubs, and we do have a great variety. And then in summary, we just wanted to state that nothing in this policy really is intended to violate our non-distribution or our distribution of non-school materials or our advertising policies. This is just clubs, student interest clubs or groups in their proprietary activities and events. That's a first draft. We do hope to perfect this fairly soon and share it with schools so it can be shared with the student interest clubs.
Thank you. Does anybody have any comments on this draft? I think it's a way of keeping us within the guidelines that we've set forth, but also giving a little more flexibility as well.
And I'm open to any misspelled words that people find. And I haven't gotten Pat's feedback, so whatever he tells me, we'll use that. Get the feathers out. I can do it.
Getting that transparency, so that's a good thing.
Thank you, Dr. Nolte.
I'm out on that.
At this time, do we have anything else that needs to, we do have something else.
Yeah, if I can find it, hold on. I did talk to Mr. Francis today, and in order not to have any unnecessary board meetings this summer, we talked about just our meetings forthcoming, and he and I agreed on some things that we would like to propose to you all. Our June meeting is scheduled for June the 10th, I believe, and that makes perfect sense to us. We would do that meeting on June the 10th. We would like to have one special called meeting. This is very normal during the last week of the month. In particular, if we're filling administrative positions that are 12-month employees. And so we would like to get your thoughts on meeting either Monday, the 24th of June, Tuesday, the 25th, or Wednesday, the 26th. Mr. Francis did, and I really don't have a preference on those, but one of those three dates, we think it would be good to have a meeting, probably not a very long meeting, just special called for personnel to hire people who we've collected up until that point over the summer.
24th,
15th through the 22nd.
yeah, that's the week before. The 26th, that's a Wednesday night, would that be sort of a, you got,
No go on 26th.
Yeah, that's enough.
24th would be good.
I'm gonna be out of town on the 25th, but the 24th might be, is everybody okay on the 24th?
Right now, yeah.
I'll share that with Mr. Francis, and he can bring it back to you on Monday.
Be the first choice, okay.
Okay? And then we felt like instead of having a meeting earlier in July, if we could wait just a little bit, instead of doing it on the 8th or the 15th, if we could wait until about the 22nd, that would allow us to have you all act on more employees. You know, we employ a lot of people each summer, And so one of the things that Mr. Francis and I wanted to suggest to you was the 22nd.
I'm good.
Good to me right now.
I'm good. Good. 22nd. You'll be out of town.
It's good for me.
Okay, so we may have one conflict or
Okay.
there on that one.
Again, I'll talk to Mr. Francis and he can talk to you all again at the regular meeting. And then, the 12th is the typical schedule for the August meeting. That, teachers report on the 13th. And if we're going to do orientation with them that we're required to do, under some of the state regulations, plus we have a big, we have one orientation already set for the 12th, so we wanted you to consider August the 5th
Giving it back.
for August.
Yeah, the first Monday of August. This is second. It's a long vacation. Hey, we'll video you in.
So we may have at least one conflict that day too. That's not intentional, Dr. Rogers. I'll share this information.
In July and August.
I'll share this information with Mr. Francis and he can discuss it with you again on Monday. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Dr. Nolte. Anybody else have anything else they want to address the board with at this time? I do
During
want,
the work session, but, after, yeah, I've got 90 of these tickets that needs to be sold before I leave here tonight.
okay.
$1 a piece.
Well, I was going to, the art show is going on right now
These have to
this
pay.
week at Hazelwood School, I think, the old Hazelwood School.
Yeah, down near Folkmoot.
Moot. So if you haven't been by, go by and look at that. The drawdown, Pisgah's doing a drawdown, they're selling tickets. And that is the, what date?
18th.
The 18th of August?
No,
No, of
15th of this month.
May.
Oh, May, okay, so they're going ahead, they're doing that this month. And then Tuscola is gonna do a drawdown as well, and that's August the 3rd. So there's tickets available for both of those, and then there are also half and half tickets for the Tuscola Pisgah football game. So, wanna make sure, and I think the pot's up to $14,000 already, so we're getting pretty close. So with,
That's the drawdown. I mean, the half and half for Tuscola Bisbee game.
yes,
You got how much on it?
14,000, I think.
Is that what these tickets are you're
So
selling?
these tickets are the 50-50 for their drawdown on August the 3rd.
So we're having two, yeah. Yes.
We got a half and half and a drawdown going, and a 50-50 going on with Tuscola.
Okay.
This is a mega 50-50.
We got all kinds of fundraisers and things going on.
Tuscola's trying to get on the block there to meet these Pisgah boosters.
Yeah.
They gotta work on it. They're starting.
Okay.
I had to get a Pisgah buyer to sell them.
I know, look at this.
Ooh,
Anything else?
ooh.
Nothing else coming before the committee, then I'll say that we're adjourned.